Just a few more and we're just finishing up the tech.
Oh, we are. Are we live?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Good evening. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here this evening. My name is Davis Farmer. I'm the president of the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire. We are a not-for-profit organization. We are a non-partisan organization. Our job is to educate people about affairs that impact the United States going on outside the United States. We are supported by our membership, and we will be delighted for any of you who are not members to have you join. The World Affairs Council is ridiculously cheap, so we're a great bargain. But if you all enjoyed tonight's program and are interested in the programming that we do on a regular basis, please consider becoming members. Tonight I have what I consider to be a rare privilege. I get to introduce somebody who I think is one of the few or a vanishingly small number of people who understand how our government is supposed to work. She's somebody who is happy to reach across the aisle. She understands that compromise is not a dirty word, and she spends an awful lot of time making sure that she understands the issues in great detail. Recently returned from a trip to the Ukraine to see what goes on there firsthand. It's my great pleasure, and it's a great pleasure for the World Affairs Council to introduce Senator Maggie Hassan.
Well, Davis, thank you so much for that really wonderful introduction. Thank you and Tim Horgan and the World Affairs Council for making tonight possible. Thank you to Svitla and Brian and Professor Jordan for your participation tonight, but particularly Svitla, thank you for your powerful advocacy, for using your voice and creativity to shine a light on the struggles of the people of Ukraine. Thank you, Brian, for your leadership and your work on behalf of the Ukrainian people. Your organization truly embodies New Hampshire's commitment to standing up for freedom and working to make a difference for others. I will take a quick note to say that about 2 weeks after Putin invaded Ukraine, a whole lot of the ambassadors from European countries were meeting with senators. And I got there early enough to just be talking with them informally. And I said I was from New Hampshire and began to explain where it is. And one of the ambassadors said, no, we know. Your motto is live free or die. And so it was a very good moment, and that has centered me a lot in these last couple of years now. Tonight I want to discuss why it is in the United States' interest to support Ukraine and defeat Vladimir Putin, why we can't afford to ignore the lessons of World War II, and how this moment is a crossroads for American leadership, security, and democracy. More than 2 years ago, Vladimir Putin began his unprovoked, unjustified, and brutal invasion of Ukraine, a war unlike any seen in Europe since World War II. Tens of thousands of soldiers have died, and hundreds of thousands more have been injured. At least 10,000 Ukrainian citizens have been killed as a result of Putin's invasion, and millions have been displaced. When Putin's soldiers seize Ukrainian villages, they commit unspeakable atrocities. They've used torture and rape to terrorize the population. They have even abducted more than 19,000 Ukrainian children as hostages, snatching them from their homes and taking them deep into Russia. It's hard to put into words to characterize the Ukrainian people's response. The word heroic is part of it, but it's really insufficient. With tenacity, creativity, and a spirit that can best be described as live free or die, they have fought Putin to a standstill, and using our weapons, decimated his military capabilities. As Davis mentioned, I visited Ukraine last month, and President Zelensky and his military leaders made clear to me that against all odds, they can win this war. The Ukrainian spirit is indomitable, their ingenuity is unlimited. But they need our help, and if we fail to provide it, Ukraine will lose, and Putin will conquer more territory. Ukrainian forces are desperately low on arms and ammunition. Ukrainian soldiers have been forced to withdraw in some areas, eschew counteroffensives, and ration ammunition. If they are going to remain free, if they are going to defeat Putin, then they need to be resupplied. As many of you know, in the Senate, we recently passed a bipartisan security package to deliver aid to Ukraine. However, Republicans in the House of Representatives have to date refused to bring this legislation to a vote. Now, some in Congress have argued that it isn't in America's interest to support Ukraine, that problems halfway across the world don't affect us, or that we have more pressing problems here at home. Other candidates and commentators have taken this line a step further, and they've suggested that Ukraine should appease Putin and give up its territory. At best, this view is dangerously naive, and it also misunderstands why America is supporting Ukraine. Our support of Ukraine is not an act of charity. Rather, it's an essential part of protecting our own national security. If we abandon Ukraine and deliver victory to Putin, the consequences for our own security and that of our NATO allies would be disastrous. Abandoning Ukraine would not make America safer or the world more peaceful. If Ukraine falls, Putin will continue his aggression. He's already started to lay the groundwork using false information to justify aggression towards our NATO allies in the Baltics. Putin also will likely turn his attention to Poland. Aggression against NATO members say, in this world of ours, in other lands, there are some people who, in times past, have lived and fought for freedom and seem to have grown too weary to carry on the fight. They have sold their heritage of freedom for the illusion of living, of a living. They have yielded their democracy. He went on, saying that America is in a fight, quote, for the survival of democracy. We are fighting to save a
an acute threat to our national security. So far, Ukrainians have been fighting on the front line of Russia's hybrid war against the West and democratic values, and of course, the international rules-based order more generally. This conflict not only involves conventional warfare, but also cyber and electronic warfare, nuclear threats, and a major disinformation campaign, which is fueling political polarization here in the United States as well. NATO members are aware that the Kremlin is conducting a disinformation campaign meant to deter Western states from sending more military assistance to Ukraine. Make no mistake, the U.S.'s other key nation-state adversaries, China, Iran, North Korea, are partners with Russia in this protracted hybrid war, which is why it's so important to the U.S. to work closely with its own strategic partners. Several Western intelligence agencies, including our own, have assessed that Russia is learning from its initial mistakes it made in 2022 during the initial full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And it is also preparing, according to these intelligence reports, to carry out invasions of NATO states. That's regardless of what you just told us today, by the way. So NATO states have had to weigh their military assistance to Ukraine against the possible risk of escalation, especially considering Putin's nuclear posturing. But the cost of this assistance has been relatively low compared to the enormous cost of fighting a direct war with Russia. So let's turn then to, if I can move on. Okay. I know it's hard for you in the back to see this map, but what I'm using is a map from the Institute for the Study of War. They're based in DC, an NGO based in DC, that updates the war in Ukraine maps every day. Usually they post them by the late afternoon, around 5 to 7 p.m. So this is the one from yesterday, okay? So to stay here, I wish I could go up to the map, but so just to draw your attention, if you can see it, especially those of you up front, currently Russia occupies about 18% of Ukraine, including Crimea, which it seized in 2014, and territory in 4 other regions that it claims to have annexed. That is Luhansk, kind of going down from north to south, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and then Kherson. Okay. What Russians sometimes refer to as a land bridge to Crimea. So Ukraine's forces have won back more than 50% of the territory that Russia stole, and 54% of the land. And Russia has not gained air superiority over Ukraine yet. Also, to its credit, Ukraine has broken Russia's naval superiority in the Black Sea. I know you can't see much of the Black Sea right now, but yeah, so this is Crimea and the Black Sea down here. Using a lot of ingenuity, right, in building naval drones, right, hitting about a third, destroying about a third of Russia's naval vessels in the Black Sea fleet, and the remaining have had to flee to harbors inside the territory of the Russian Federation. However, many military analysts argue that the war reached a stalemate beginning last fall. Ukraine's counteroffensive that began last June has resulted in few territorial gains, and Ukrainian forces are fiercely defending their current positions along the 620-mile front, which begins up north on the border with Russia in the northeast and goes all the way down to the Kherson region there and the Dnepro River, right near where it meets the Black Sea. So Russia is widely seen as having the momentum now because of its artillery superiority and its force strength. Russia has 3 times the population of Ukraine, just about. Also right now, and I can't emphasize this enough, the Russians are able to fire 5 times the number of artillery shells per day than Ukraine is able to at this moment. So the shortages are that severe on Ukraine's side. Last month, Russian forces seized the Donetsk town of Avdiivka. You might have read about this, which was Russia's largest advance in the area since it took Bakhmut last May. Russia has been deliberately bombing civilian targets as a part of its strategy to demoralize Ukrainians and force President Volodymyr Zelensky's government to capitulate. Last week, Russian drones and missiles hit Ukraine's capital of Kyiv and Ukraine's power grid, which left more than 1 million people without power. Lastly, and sorry for going over, what might happen next, according to military analysts? This spring, now that Putin's rigged election is behind him, as expected, Russian forces will continue taking offensive measures to destabilize Ukrainian defensive lines and then launch a more muscular offensive in the summer. The longer that Ukraine lacks adequate supplies of ammunition, including artillery shells, air defense interceptors, and longer-range missiles, the more likely Russia will gain more ground. Putin, and I stress this again, has expressed no general interest in reaching a territorial compromise with Zelensky's government. And most Ukrainians still hope to regain all their territory. To defend itself and prepare for a renewed counteroffensive, Ukraine must receive more military aid and mobilize and train new soldiers as soon as possible. So I'm going to stop there. And thank you all for listening. I look forward to addressing your questions after Svitla and Brian give their remarks. Thank you.
All right, before I bring Brian up, I want to make an apology to those people who are watching online. We have been having some audio issues. We think we have it resolved at this point. I understand that you've missed a significant portion of this important event, and we do apologize for that. We are a small nonprofit trying our best to make these programs available online as best we can. We are certainly not experts at any of this, so we appreciate your grace for the big error in that. Okay, so thank you, Dr. Jordan, for your wonderful remarks. I think we got most of yours out there, so hopefully we won't have any more issues, but I'd like to now bring up Brian Nolan. He's the founder of NH4 Ukraine, a nonprofit locally based here that is doing great work to raise funds to head over to Ukraine and provide humanitarian support. So he's done 6 one-month-long stints so far, and on April 14th, I believe he's headed over to Ukraine for a 6-month stay to really make a larger impact with their work and their fundraising. So, Brian, I'll bring you up.
Good evening, everybody, and thanks to the World Affairs Council for having me here tonight, and thank you to Senator Hassan for her wonderful support. It's nice to have a congressional delegation that's on the right side of history. So my name is Brian Nolan. I founded NH4Ukraine.org. Shortly after the war started, heard a couple references here to Germany invading Poland in 1939. And that, I would have to say, is probably my primary motivation for starting this nonprofit. Watching it on TV when the invasion started, it just reminded me so much of Germany invading Poland, the brutality of the invasion, shelling farming villages, just trying to roll right over the land. And after watching it for a week or so, I knew I had to do something. I donated to a fund over there, but I had to get on the ground over there and help out. I don't have any connections to Ukraine. My grandmother emigrated from Krakow, Poland in 1904. That's as close as I come. So let me tell you a little bit about what we do, and I'll try to give you a brief idea of what it's like to operate on the ground in Ukraine. So we started in March 2022. So far, we've raised about $330,000 here. We basically raise money here and bring it over to Ukraine. Nowadays, we spend the money entirely in Ukraine. It's not really cost effective to ship anything over there anymore, and the airlines don't comp suitcases the way they used to. So we try to buy everything in Ukraine. We have a lot of wholesale contacts over there. We buy everything at the right price and in bulk. We like to buy in Ukraine to stimulate their economy. We personally deliver about 95% of the aid we buy, so we know where it's going. And there's a big added value to us delivering it personally. Most of the people in the villages that we deliver it to have never met an American before. And when we show up with our van with a big load of food and hygiene products, they're thrilled to meet you. They are flabbergasted that someone from the land of milk and honey would go over to Ukraine, to this little podunk village out in the middle of nowhere that's been decimated by fighting, and care enough to deliver the goods. And then I always remind them that this was made possible by people in the area where I live. It's hundreds and hundreds of donors who care about Ukraine, and we see a lot of tears when we tell them that. People are really touched. We post frequent updates when we get over to Ukraine. So we have a Facebook page. So pretty much every night I try to post our activities on there, show people how their funds are being spent. And to back up a step, we deliver it mainly nowadays to the villages that have been directly impacted by the fighting. Generally, we stay in Kharkiv or Dnipro in the east of the country. You know, we look at it as like a triage situation. Who needs the aid the most? We don't have enough money to help everybody in Ukraine. So the areas in the east that have been liberated from Russian occupation, those are the areas that have really suffered the most. They have compromised infrastructure. A lot of times they have no water. They might not have electricity, cell phone service. So if we're going to spend money over there, we like to get these people by with the basics. So I'm heading over there. I'm doing a solo trip this time for 6 months. I'll be staying in Kharkiv primarily and working with other NGOs over there, non-governmental organizations, to help them out, as well as buy our own goods and deliver them to the villages. So here's a different map showing the war situation over there. The red area is occupied by Russia. The blue dots are all the places where we delivered aid this past November and December when we were over there. We like to focus our efforts where the blue dots are in the east. The green areas are all the areas where the Ukrainians have liberated territory from the Russians. That's where the destruction tends to be the heaviest. We've made a couple drops down in Kherson, down there. That's right across the river from where the Russians are. So you do hear artillery strikes now and then in that area. And we deliver Nikopol and the Zaporizhia area as well. This is the beginning of a day for us. We go to a food warehouse. It's like a Costco on steroids. It's a chain in Ukraine. And believe it or not, that will all fit in that van. It's a challenge sometimes, but that's about $2,000 worth of aid. In the U.S., it probably costs about $5,000 to $6,000. The dollar's strong, the hryvnia is weak, and we get a big bang for the buck, and we're buying wholesale. So we spend it smartly. I'm a retired businessman, so I like to get a good bang for the buck. So all that stuff goes in the van. We'll head out 2 or 3 hours, drive into a remote village. This is a delivery we did right before Christmas to Nikopol. It's a religious group that holds a big community dinner every year for the displaced people living in the area. Nikopol, again, is right across the river from the Zaporizhia power plant, the nuclear power plant you may have heard about. So they get the displaced people. Let's see. Well, this is a video, but I'm not quite sure how to start it. So
В мене ж прізвище таке, що обов'язує мене.
Плец, по-моему.
А как? Скажи.
Maybe плец.
Як тепленько тут, да? Благословляємо.
This week they put on a big community dinner under a tent. It's wonderful. Gives all the displaced people living in the area a chance to get together. And this is a before picture. It happened. This is before the war. This is just an example of what happens in these villages. This is a beautiful Ukrainian Orthodox church. A lot of them are really gorgeous. They have gold top domes. This is the before picture, and this is a small village we came into on the way to a drop called Bohorodichny. We couldn't make it to the drop because we found out Google Maps didn't know the bridge was blown out and we had to get across. So we took a little while, drove around the town. Not a single person is living in this town. Every single house is wiped out. And that is what that church looks nowadays. This is the type of destruction you see routinely in the previously occupied areas. It just breaks your heart. And both buildings are completely gutted. There are pockmarks from ammunition and artillery strikes in every single item in that town, from stop signs to houses. This is a pretty routine sight in these areas, blown up tanks sitting by the side of the road. Russian or Soviet tanks have a bad habit of doing what they call turret toss. They ignite the ammo and blow the turret off the top. This is in that same town where the church was destroyed. And this is another video going through it. This is a delivery we did in a village that had been liberated about a year ago. It was a freezing cold day. We had to have a fellow from the military administration guide us house to find out where people were living. We don't normally do house-to-house drops, but in this town, we needed some guidance on where to deliver the aid to. These are some grateful villagers who they want to say thank you any way they can, so this fellow brought us out a container of Ukrainian moonshine. We did not have the courage to try it. There's too many pieces floating around in it. But they are so incredibly grateful for the aid we give them. And speaking of gratitude, this is what you see on about a third of the soldiers' arms over there, an American flag. They do not take our aid for granted. They are so incredibly grateful for what the United States has done to them. They know they wouldn't be in the fight without us. And we see inspirational things like this. This is right outside Bucha. It's kind of a graveyard of Russian hardware that got destroyed by the side of the road. We just happened to be driving by it. And some Ukrainian artist decorated it with some lovely blue and yellow art. It's beautiful. And I like this photo because it often reminds me of why we're doing what we do. That's all destroyed Russian armor in Sofia Square in the middle of Kyiv. And this little girl and her mom came walking along. I asked Mom if I could take a photo of her. And the contrast is just so stark. This cute little kid in her colorful outfit with destroyed Russian armor in the background reminds me why we do what we do. And we did a lot of deliveries to schools and kindergartens. This last trip, Christmas was coming up. We brought a lot of candy for the kids. It's probably the only candy they're going to get for 6 months. So we made a lot of gift packs for all the kids in the schools and dropped those off. In addition, all the routine hygiene products, diapers, loads of food that we bring. This is up in the Sumy area, up in the northeast. This area was briefly occupied by Russia. We like to take these photos at the end of every drop, send them back to people on Facebook. So this has become our unofficial motto. Thoughts and prayers help, but donations deliver. If you want to really help out, you don't have to donate to us, but if you get a chance to donate to a reputable organization, it's really the best way to make a direct difference over there. Because like I said, we can't bring things over. People contact us, can you bring a load of clothing over or something like that? It's just not cost effective anymore. So giving somebody a donation, let them spend the money in country over there. It's by far the best way to help out. From the Ukrainian people, you might be able to pronounce that better than Yakuyu. Thank you. We love getting these photos after the fact. After the aid drop, they send us the photos of the recipients of the aid. So thank you, everybody, for your time.
All right, thank you, Brian, for sharing some of your experiences, and look forward to diving into that a little bit further with our moderated Q&A here in a moment. But of course, we want to bring up the person that brought us together tonight, Svitla Volkova. She is a multidisciplinary artist, cultural dynamics shape her work. In 2019, she started an agender clothing company, and she has a passion for making change in her community, which is a perfect segue into what she's here to talk with us tonight about. She came over on Monday, was it? From where she's living now in Lviv, but originally from Kherson. And we are so delighted to have her here tonight to talk about her country and her experiences. So Svitla, please.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. First of all, I wanna say thank you for inviting me here and to be on this event and to deliver the messages that are important for me and my country. And also, I want to express my great gratitude for Harry that make all this happen and possible. And also, while I heard every one of you, I just became with some thought before I came here and when I was preparing for this speech. Actually, I see and I'm so expressed that, and I'm so thankful for you that you are so deep in this team and you have so deep understanding, so deep. You so sympathize us and trying to help us. It's amazing. So I will talk about the same things as you, but from my personal perspective, and you say that I'm a fashion designer, I'm a social activist, and I'm a digital artist from Kherson. And I was socially active from my early childhood. It's 2004 years, and I was participating in Orange Revolution. I was so young, but I strive to make changes in my country. Yeah, and I hope, yeah. So I'm from Kherson, and I'm the one who was depicted as liberated by Russia, but due to Russian propaganda. And as a result, one day I found myself liberated from the living in my beautiful home on the river bank in Kherson, from my fashion business I provide there, from my equipment because I had my studio and my home and it was robbed. They were robbed also my perfumes. So my relatives were actually stolen. Some of them are still under captivity, and for some of them we still don't have any information where are they actually. And my father was liberated from his lands. Yeah. But due to Russian propaganda, it has changed so many times that I got lost a bit. Shouldn't I say liberated by Russian propaganda, but rather prevented? Because due to their words, Ukrainians worked in biolaboratories financed by US, or I just dared to live successful life and care about my surrounding, but who gave me the permission due to the word of some Russian opinion leaders and soldiers? And finally, I'm just Ukrainian, so I must be destroyed by their words. And somehow the last statement seems somewhat true. This is maternity hospital in Kherson. And my cousin gave the birth for little Polinka, her daughter, in January last year. And while girls were there, Russian missile hit the building. Luckily, girls are alive, but Russia systematically targets civilians, and if you know, a few days ago, they just targeted Art Academy in Kiev while students were there. Safety guarantees. World gave us only 3 days to be conquered. But we have been fighting over 2 years. And my native city was liberated by my country. Yeah, it's my nephew. And here you can see Ukrainian artists, cultural leaders, actors, and all of them were demolished last century by Russia. And like, it is the way how Ukraine loses all our scientific, cultural, artistic potential for centuries. And here you can see Ukrainian modern poets. But they serve as paramedics, soldiers, sometimes as cultural diplomats. And the most part of us don't have an ability to realize our talents, and moreover, to contribute the inventions, their new ideas to humanity. But the main point, we don't want to be the victims. We put our efforts to our victory. And thankfully, for international support and awareness, finally we have a chance to conquer this evil. That evil that looms over the entire world. And you should understand that we fight not only for our land, as it is, we fight for freedom and values and the way that we want to live in our country, because we don't want to live like Russians choosing to live, and I think no one wants. And unfortunately, if we lose, the world will be forced to gather humanitarian aid for Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, and so on. Russia perceives every conquered nation as a resource for the future wars. And I hope everyone recognizes the image of the reality where malicious, insidious, and oppressive model of behavior prevails. It's like, if you don't guess, it's the image from the movie that I really liked in my childhood, Back to the Future. Yeah, no field is outside of the politics. As a fashion designer, I made a fashion collection dedicated to Azovstal defenders trying to fight Russian propaganda last year. And that's how Harry mentioned me, and now I'm talking in front of audience of the country that is our great support and which help is so crucial for us. So no, every effort matters, is my point. And definitely we need more weapons. Yeah, thank you.
Pam and Brian, you want to join us up here? I'm just going to shut this off so that we don't have it in our faces. Okay, well, thank you all for your insights. I'll get that. You guys will share. So I really appreciate all you guys had to offer this conversation. You all came at it from different perspectives, from different backgrounds, but certainly saw some unique themes that came through. And one of the things that I didn't hear much about is sort of the Russian perspective. I mean, you spoke a little bit about the Russian propaganda, about the people of Ukraine. But one of the things that I have been most interested in is how does the claim by the Russians that they were forced into this, how does that resonate with each of you? And I'd love to get your thoughts first.
They could say anything, but if we will follow the history, they every time find any purpose to invade countries. Not only Ukraine was invaded by Russia, Georgia was invaded by Russia, Chechnya was invaded by Russia. If we will talk about the last century, Ukraine at all was like conquered by Russia, and Poland was invaded by Russia. And if you will read their historical books in the schools, you will see that they count the start of World War II not from 1939, but from 1941, because they just trying to hide this part of story. That's it.
Brian?
Thank you. Well, I'd say there's revisionist history, and then there's Putin's revisionist history. He takes it to a whole nother level. I just thought of something. I have a very good friend over in Ukraine, Alexei Palko, who I've shared a lot of van time with, driving to different places. And he loves telling me about Russian propaganda, because he used to go to Russia quite often. He lives in Kharkiv, which is not far from Russia. And when, I think it was after the 2014 invasion, he was in Russia, and he saw this footage on TV. They were talking about, Russia was talking about all the unrest in Ukraine and how unhappy people are in Ukraine. And it was footage from some other country in the 1990s or something like that. He recognized the event. But this is the type of misinformation campaign that Russia's been launching for a long time. And it's getting steadily worse because you shut down any semblance of free media in Russia. So there clearly is no justification for this invasion. Ukraine was not a threat to Russia. Ukraine had something like 15% of the number of tanks Russia had, a tiny military compared to Russia. They don't have nukes. Why in God's name would they try to invade Russia with that? It's just a total fabrication. But liars lie, and Putin speaks, and it's one and the same.
Thank you. So can you hear me? Okay. So from my perspective as a political scientist who actually has spent 2 years of my life total in Russia, unfortunately I've never been to Ukraine. I started out in my career hoping, in some ways naively assuming that Russia was democratizing. And I did my work on legal affairs and human rights, budding human rights in Russia, constitutionalism. But that was before Putin landed on the scene in 1999, a lot of my original work. Once he did come to power, because of President Yeltsin stepping down and choosing him as a safe replacement, it took a few years for his anti-Western views to be fully expressed, as if it took him a while to finally figure out what his false narrative was going to be about. So on the one hand, it's about, and these are all falsehoods, claiming that Ukraine is, including the current leadership under a Jewish Ukrainian citizen named Zelensky, right, the president, that Ukraine is filled with Nazis, which in Putin's mind simply means people who don't want to knuckle under to Russia's rule. And that they need to be, and that, like I said when I originally talked, that they need to be subjugated to Russia, and that they are not real people or a real country. But if you study the history, and I invite you to read works by a Harvard Ukrainian history professor named Serhiy Plokhy, for instance, who's written a book on this very topic, then you understand why and how Ukrainians are real people, right? They're a real nation. They have a real history. They have a real language. But how Putin has created in his mind and then has forced it down his people's throats a false historical narrative that goes all the way back to medieval Rus. when he tells people that Rus was based on the rule of Russians, actually it had to do with three people: the Belarusians, the Russians, and the Ukrainians. So, in other words, Putin has in his mind, in the way that he has constructed his false narrative, both an anti-Western narrative that Russia, in its special imperialism and expansion, has this unique, authentic mission, right? And to expand and to defend itself and to take the opportunity to conquer other nations, other lands. So he wants to return, he wants to make Russia great again through the imperial history, both in terms of Tsarist Russia as well as the Soviet Empire. So I'll stop there, I can go on and on, but read, if you're interested in this topic, read books by Serhiy Plokhy of Harvard. Also, there's another book that has recently come out by Maria Popova of McGill University and Oksana Chevelle at Tufts University, called Russia and Ukraine, Entangled Histories, Diverging State.
Great, thank you.
I have something to add. There is not only the books, there is a really nice course on the YouTube from the professor of Yale University.
Yes, Timothy Snyder?
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
All right, and we can, if you guys can send us those links, we can put them out to anyone who registered for the event or signed in when we had you come in. So I can ask questions all night long. I do want to bring in the audience here in a moment, but I think one really important question to ask, because we rarely hear from an actual real-life Ukrainian.
You say it like I'm
I know.
an animal, like, you know.
Perhaps a magical unicorn. What are the hopes of Ukrainians in how this war ends, and what does Ukraine look like moving into the future?
We want our borders to be restored, and we want to come to our cities. Like my granny, she just returned to her son because she wants to live in her own city. My father just waiting when he will be on the protests, and he wants to return to the city. I'm totally not support this idea until the Crimea will be liberated, because people on the protests are not so really movable, and when it's all over there is a lot of missiles, etc. It's really dangerous. But no one is ready to be conquered by Russia, and I know that you aware about Zelensky, etc. But Ukrainian defense, of course, Zelensky is leading in somehow this movement, but it really depends on our own citizens and our own strength. And that, my father decided he will go to the front line, and he's 56 years old. She need to protect me as well. And a lot of my friends, they are already died, and we go to the cemeteries with my other friends, just visit them, and we have parties a few years ago, and we make the festivals, etc., etc. But no one are ready to Russia to conquer us. Yeah, we are ready to fight and to restore our country.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. So if you have questions in the audience, we have a microphone just to make sure. We have one over here for people who are sticking with us online. I will be monitoring on my phone here the chat and our council@wacnh.org email address, so please send us your questions there. But please introduce yourself, and love to hear your question.
Hi. Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Hi, my name is Malcolm McDonough. I'm a big fan of all of yours. I appreciate all the work you guys do. And I feel like all of us here are human, hopefully. And as humans, I feel like it's undeniable what Russia is doing is wrong. As an individual, it's wrong. And I think there's a larger issue at play in Russia, which you guys have kind of touched upon. It's rather than the Russian people being controlled, they're manipulated through propaganda and through culture, which makes them think it's okay, and it allows them to kind of step out of the kind of human sympathy that all of us have here. So, what would your suggestion be to help fight propaganda in Russian to address the larger problem of people supporting Putin's ideology?
And I'd just like to add to that, it's not a unique Russian problem. Many people here in the US as well believe what they are being told. So how do we, and this is something as the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire we have to overcome as well, is how do we stop preaching to the choir? How do we talk to people who may not have the same views as us? We got an email prior to this saying, well, when are you going to bring the non-government voice perspective to this conversation? And I don't know about any of you, but I'm not paid by the government. I don't know about the rest of you, but certainly these are true stories. These are real experiences. So how do we break through that wall?
Thank you. So I teach a course on genocide and international justice, and I have some students in the audience who are taking the course. And so we grapple with this question all the time. We understand that a lot of the motivation comes from fear, right? Lack of knowledge, and a concern of existential dread. So it just depends on who the people are who might be impressionable, like you're saying, more susceptible to propaganda. But there are different ways on the individual level to talk with them and show them some kind of respect and dignity. I think, if we go through if we try to use our values of human security and human rights, then we need to treat everyone with dignity, even those whose values we don't respect at all. But on the whole, the issue about Russia, for instance, is really difficult now. Now that Alexei Navalny has been murdered, he was Putin's main opposition politician who wasn't able to run for office against Putin a few weeks ago because he was murdered by Putin's order. So his wife, Yulia, who has settled in Germany, has stepped up to try to replace him as best she can. She didn't want to, obviously she didn't want her husband to die, but she has taken the reins of his pro-democracy, pro-human rights approach and campaign. And so I think she's trying to use whatever media measures she can to reach out to Russians inside of Russia, as well as those million Russians who have fled their country, who don't support Putin, who don't support the war. So it's the individual leaders whom we need to support on that general level, who can speak out and who could say to others, listen, we can do this together. Those Russians who showed up on March 17th and that last day of the so-called election, who were there lining up in front of the polls like Mr. Navalny had asked them and his wife had asked them. So there are ways in which to try to encourage people not to be fearful anymore and to think about human dignity. So I'll end that there. And
well, it's a great question, by the way. If only I had a great answer to that. I think the most we can do is try to combat that at home here with facts. There's a certain segment of our population that unfortunately doesn't have much interest in factual information. It all boils down to your information sources, and unfortunately there's a big ecosphere out there peddling misinformation. Some of the questions I've had at events we do are truly mind-boggling. It wonders where people are getting their information. Like, we've had people come up to us and say, oh, I heard Zelensky outlawed Christianity there. They're no longer a Christian nation. in Ukraine. And my buddy John that I've made a bunch of trips over there with says, man, you couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting a Christian church in Ukraine. They are everywhere, these Orthodox Christian churches, and they're packed on the weekends. You know, but it's that type of stupidity that just has found its way into our culture, that it's just mind-boggling that people would buy into this stuff. But it boils down to your source of information. You gotta get a reliable source, but easier said than done. Wish I had a better answer for you.
For me, it's really difficult questions because, like, I don't think I have enough power now to think how to help Russians, even to fight their propaganda, and even it can be helpful for me. But anyway, I think such things like, if you know, we have this journalist who make the interviews with Russian soldiers under captivity, and where they prove that Ukraine treat them in the right way, etc., and they organize all these calls with their families, etc. I think it somehow opened their eyes, but the question is, do they want to open their eyes? It's a question that I always ask myself. I really love one interview from Peter Pomeransky, if you know, it's like the a scientist from UK. He developed propaganda. He's searching about propaganda. Yeah, and he just talking that it was the main task of Russian propaganda to make people think that they don't able to influence anything. Democratic agencies doesn't work. Like all democracies is a chaos. And we need to make this, have this leader, and we need to avoid any responsibility. And what is really scary for me, when Russians cross the border of Russia, and they are in safe place, they are still unresponsible. Why? That's why I'm asking fashion designers from Russia who are not living there, so they are unsafe and their families unsafe. What their fashion collection was dedicated to this issue, and how you just trying to change the situation that also is important for your own country, because you somehow you run out. You don't want to live in those conditions. Why I don't change, trying to change. Though I think this is the first category of people we can communicate, because communicating with the people inside Russia is much more difficult.
Hi, does that work? Okay, my name is Mary Heslin. I've lived in Ukraine since 2017. I was a monitor with OSCE, Denise, Lugansk, they called it Lugansk, and Severodonetsk. I had to leave because we were invaded. My house got blown up, my neighbors were killed, and my office was destroyed. I've since moved to Lviv, where I'm a volunteer, and I'm a volunteer with an agency that does not do anything humanitarian. We support the troops on the front. We make drones, we make energy bars for the trenches, we make camouflage nets, we've done some incidental humanitarian stuff. But this bit about we don't have time to worry about Russian public opinion or how to fix it. We need to kill enough Russians to make the Russians leave. And I'm sorry, it's a war. And so I hate it when any of these discussions get sidetracked into how does Russia feel about it? It happens all the time. And Navalny, for God's sake, Navalny has no feelings at all. He had no feelings at all for Ukraine. He was fine with keeping Crimea. So I just, I want to say that. But speaking of drones, I wanted to ask Pam about it. You didn't mention drones, and drones, I believe, are the reason that Ukraine is still here. So do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, well, they've been obviously, sorry, talking directly to Mary. Yeah, I mean, of course, as you know, as many of us know, the Ukrainian forces have been very innovative, ingenious in their ability to take just drones that were built for just any old reason, not for military, and convert them into, killer drones for military purposes that have been quite effective. whether on the front line or in the use of naval drones, which I had mentioned, contributed a lot to the destruction of about a third of Russia's Black Sea fleet. The drones have been important to Ukraine's staying afloat, literally, as a force, David against Russia's Goliath. But also Russia, of course, has drones too, and a significant number of them from Iran. Yes, I'm sure you have. Yes, indeed. And of course, technology isn't everything, but Ukraine is also very much working hard to try to increase its military-industrial capacity with the help of EU member states, other NATO states, the U.S. Yeah, I mean, they need more drones, but they especially need the artillery shells and yeah. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's amazing. It's another amazing thing that the Ukrainian forces have done that have surprised everyone, and we shouldn't have been so surprised. We should have believed that they were going to be able to respond as well as they have to the Russians in the first place. And not only do they have technology, they have morale and really great logistics, and so.
I'm glad you mentioned the drones, because it's almost essentially become a drone war now. It's this battle to measure, countermeasure, measure, countermeasure. I wanted to mention on our website, it's nh4ukraine.org, nh4ukraine.org. We have a monthly newsletter we send out. We don't sell anybody's address. We just fire off one newsletter every month. And I have some great YouTube resources on there and some Telegram channels where you can get updates on what Ukraine's doing with drones. There's some fascinating videos out there. I think most Americans don't really appreciate the ingenuity that Ukraine has applied to these drones, where they're able to strike deep inside Russia now, and they're all homemade Ukrainian drones they're using. They're not using any American products over there. So if you have any interest, sign up for a newsletter. I have some great resources. You can watch a lot of videos about it and that type of thing. But drones, definitely the future of warfare.
Yeah, I just can add that, like, my great friend, Maria Berlinska, she is like the one of the person who launched this program about drone development. It's even in 2014 when everything started. And also I really excited about our sea drones. They are awesome. Yeah.
Terry Flahay, a two-part question. Within Ukraine, how is President Zelensky viewed today? 2 years ago, he was George Washington coming in and maintain the country. What is the viewpoint today after there have been some internal issues going on with graft and other issues in Ukraine that every country has? And the second part of the question is, if anything ever were to happen to him, is there someone who could step in and continue moving forward?
I want to say that I don't know how, in Ukraine, we are not really focused on our leader, and we don't really pay all our hopes on our leader, like political leader. I didn't vote for Zelensky. He's really nice in the tactic, but really worse in strategic, for me, as I think. And he not really treat culture as well as it should be. Anyway, he was a really nice leader for the beginning of the war, and I hope he will be on this post until the end, because we don't have enough power to make a new election, I think. If he will be killed, it's not a problem. Ukrainians fight, not Zelensky. Yep, he's our face, and he just represents our thoughts. But it will change. Like, for a bit, we'll make a little house, and then we will just gather it, and we will cope with it. Like, if you know a bit more about Ukrainian history, we had such a president that we don't like, Yanukovych, and we came to our main squares, and we make revolution, and a lot of our people were killed. But we demand change, and we just to achieve all that we demand, because we want to be the part of Europe, we want to choose this way of development, etc., etc. So we are not like restricted by our leader, and we are not really depend on it.
Hi, my name is Ko Busha, and I wanted to start off by saying thank you for all for being here. It's very informative. My question is, why should Republicans in the United States House of Representatives pass Ukraine aid, which would most likely be in the form of a loan that's not going to be paid back, when Democrats will not budge and pass substantial immigration policy on our own southern border as part of the package?
Did everyone hear that?
Yeah, good question. I don't know if you followed the recent developments where the Senate passed a wide-ranging bill that included the heftiest southern border protection in decades. The Republicans would prefer to keep that as a cudgel to bash the Democrats with for the election. That was crafted by James Lankford. He's one of the most conservative senators in the Senate. And it was also endorsed by the Border Patrol Union, a hearty endorsement from them. So Democrats have agreed to compromise, meet them halfway. And the thing is, supporting Ukraine is a no-brainer whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. We're not giving them fistfuls of cash. We made a lot of mistakes in Iraq. We brought over pallets of money over there. One thing I like to convey when I do a talk is the vast majority of the weapons we are giving them are second-generation weapons. The attack of missiles we give them, they're built in the 1990s. Those missiles expire. It's either given to Ukraine to use against the Russians or pay Raytheon to destroy them. We're going to renew those missiles with more modern, updated missiles anyway. So the aid package you hear about, the $60 billion, that's not money we're giving them in Ukraine. That's money, 70% of it stays in the United States. It gets spent with defense contractors here to upgrade our munitions and our weapons. We're giving them the old Abrams tanks that we're not using anymore, building anymore. So a lot of people have a misunderstanding about that. We're not giving them buckets of cash. 70% of the money stays here, stimulates the economy. We're giving them the weapons we essentially don't want anymore, but they're still a lot better than what they got over there. And we've already heard about the reasons why we should all be in favor of Ukrainian victory, because Putin has made no secret about wanting to retake the Baltics. Those are next on his list. He would Russianize the Ukrainian military for 3 or 4 years, then make a move against Russia or the Baltics. So it is in our national interest to stop Russia now, and we haven't lost a single U.S. soldier doing it, but we will if they go into a NATO country.
Thank you. And this is still a largely bipartisan issue. Most Republicans in both houses of Congress support still funding Ukraine militarily and doing it, just like Brian said, in a way that really benefits us here financially. So I think that's important. It's important to say that it's the MAGA Republicans or the far-right Republicans in the House of Representatives who don't want to move forward and get a vote on this bill that's already passed in the Senate. Okay, thanks.
I think it's like, I can't add anything. I just can add some words for your speech regarding the ambitions of Russia. In Ukraine, we use, I think everyone uses TikTok, but we have a lot of videos from Russian guys there. And what they are talking about. It's like a young teenager and guys to 23, 25 years old. They are talking like, we will conquer Ukraine, we will conquer Europe, and then we will conquer our great enemy, USA. This is the ambitions of young population of Russia, exactly.
Okay, we are about half an hour past what time we told you we get to go home. But I think it's been a great conversation. I want to finish up with one question that came in online from Sofia Suhulo. She's in Claremont, New Hampshire, but born in Ukraine. And she wants to know what the 3 things we can do, and you can pick if you can, limit it to 3, that'd be great. What are the 3 things we can do to help Ukraine the most in 2024?
Weapon, F-16.
Yeah,
Do you want to mention, in case people don't know what Patriots are?
Sorry, what I...
Sorry, yeah, so they're air defense missiles that the U.S. actually has been using for decades, going back to the Gulf War. Not always so well, so it seems to me that Ukrainians are using them much better than American forces did. So another indication that our money is being used quite well, right? Yes, so they're very important for Ukraine's air defenses, and many more are needed as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'll just echo what they said. Patriot missiles, they're using them brilliantly. Some of you may have heard about we have AWACS planes here, the big airborne warning and control system planes. And Ukraine has shot down at least 2 of those recently. They cost Russia almost $500 million each. They brilliantly used Patriot missiles. Russians didn't think they'd reach them. They moved the Patriot battery right up near the front, which was risky, but that put them in range of shooting these airplanes down. And more Patriots, more attack of missiles, so they can take out the Kerch Bridge and cut off the lifeline of military aid going into Crimea. And artillery shells. They're rationing artillery shells. This aid package has been lingering since last October. It's time to let them finish the fight in Ukraine. We can't expect them to do a one-hand tie behind their backs. It's just incredibly short-sighted.
All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us here tonight. Thank you to our wonderful panel. Please help me in thanking them for their time and their insights. I really appreciate you all taking the time to come and have your questions answered, to learn more about what is going on in Ukraine, and to get some firsthand perspective, which I think is really important, so that it's not just, sorry Pam, the academics out there saying, wait, I've researched this, so don't worry. But I really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us. Again, to our online audiences, sorry about the audio issues earlier. We hopefully will get a clean recording, but if we'll put out what we can. So thank you again. Have a great night and safe travels home.